It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith. Here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about a video that a woman from Alabama made about her two adult children, just trying to start their lives and how difficult it has been for them. And you may remember I was not overly kind, because I did ask the question, when did this pop up? When did you realize that it's not 1985 anymore? And look, I said, look, this is great. The party that figures out who to address her concerns is going to get her loyalty and, millions of other voters across the country as well, because for far too long, the wants, needs, and hopes and dreams of the working class have been left way off the table. And so we reached out to Jessica McCabe and said, hey, would you like to come on the show and talk with us? And, well, lo and behold, she said yes, and she's here to share some thoughts with us. Jessica, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
So this video, you great stuff, as I talked about before, pointing out the realities of where we are. When did you realize that things aren't great? When did you have this moment of clarity that it's not 1985 anymore?
I think for me, and it's not an excuse by far any way, shape, or form, but I was in the military for 22 years. So I didn't really have to deal with rent. I had base housing. I didn't have to deal with the cost of health insurance because I had military health care. So I joined the military at 19. I was on my own since I was 16 because I could. Even my wage was only $4.85. I was able to live on my own at 16 years old. So I just didn't see it until my kids aged out of my health insurance, which was through the military, and then they started to try to get out on their own. And there was even times when I was overseas. I didn't see what was going on in America. I didn't have to worry about the inflation here because I wasn't here. We were in Japan. I was in Korea. So I was all over the place. And all I knew is that I got a paycheck the 1st and the 15th of every month. I always had a roof over my head with my kids, and we didn't have to worry about medical insurance. So not until they aged out and I retired from the military did I see the world as it was. So
it's when it directly affected you.
Because
one of the questions I didn't realize, and thanks for your service, I didn't realize you were a military, lifelong military person. So that explains a lot of being in kind of a bubble, as you pointed out. But you brought up the word inflation, and I'm hearing a lot of that. Everyone's saying, well, it's the inflation. Well, inflation is part of it. The bigger part for me has always been the fact that if you look at CEO compensation to worker compensation from 1978 to today, their wages have gone up 1,000%. Ours have gone up 12%. So the fact that prices are going up, wages unfortunately haven't, because these big corporations, these CEOs, and of course our politicians have done a hell of a job holding wages down.
Oh, well, we have not increased the federal minimum wage since 2009. And it's not because the people didn't want it. It's because it would always go to Congress, and Republicans and Democrats would always stall it in the House. And why? Because the people who they're actually working for, in my opinion, are their benefactors, which are the donors. So if you raise the minimum wage, then you lower CEO bonuses and profit margins. So it didn't benefit them, the people who are actually paying for them to be in office, to do so. And now they're saying that if they raised it, that it would put us into a lot of inflation. Well, you're right. If you raised it right now from the 725 to what it should be accounting for inflation, it would kill our economy. But if you had been doing it in increments every time the inflation went up, it wouldn't be such hard hitting as it is today.
So now when you say something like this, obviously you've gotten, because of the viral video, you've gotten a lot of people, probably on both sides of the extremes, attacking you or praising you.
Correct.
What are they saying to you?
Well, I have obviously some millennials and Gen Z saying, thank God somebody in your generation finally gets it. We're out here struggling and it's not 1985 anymore. But on the flip side, although I do have some Generation X and boomers that are agreeing as well, the biggest pushback that I'm having is from the boomers and Gen Xers saying, well, they just need to work harder or get a better job. And, we did this and I did it. They should be able to do it. Well, you're correct. If we were still in the same economy as 1985, we're not there anymore.
Yeah, no, and look, I go back to the 1985 era. I'm a union guy. Union density in this country was over 20%, close to 25%.
Mhm.
It's down to, in the private sector, 6.6%, which means the ability for people to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions has been diminished over the last 25, 30 years in incredible ways. So that view of I'll just go across the street and get a different job, a better paying job, isn't there because, well, reality is they are colluding and holding wages down on purpose.
Well, and I think more and more of this generation, the millennials and Gen Zs, they don't feel a need to stay with a company long like we did. We're like, oh, if we stay there for 20 years, we're going to get a pension. There's going to be something at the end of the tunnel. And it's because we felt like the company was committed to us and we were committed to them. And I don't think that's the case anymore. They'll just as soon as let you go in 5 seconds if they feel like their profit margins are going down. They don't care about the family unit or even the middle class as it is. And it's just, I don't see my kids being able to retire like when I did. I don't see a retirement in their future at all if something doesn't change.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But don't you think that a lot of that generation, both the millennials and especially Gen Z, are looking at the treatment that corporate America gave their parents and the screw job that Gen X has taken over these years? And we don't talk about that at all. That
No.
we've been suffering in silence as downsizing and outsourcing and consolidation have destroyed what was that thing that was able for us to build up. But fortunately, we still had it. Now the kids don't even have the beginnings of that.
No, and honestly, it's not going to get better with the outsourcing. Just look at Walmart. Just walking into Walmart, they've gotten rid of half the cashiers, which was jobs, to be now we're bagging our own groceries and saying, thank you for letting me do it. So it's everywhere you look, in McDonald's, right? They're just getting rid of the middle class. Like they're going to find some other way to have it work for them and have more profits. And middle class are stuck going, what do I do now?
Yeah.
That's why you have so many social media influencers right now, because that's what corporations are paying for. It's the quick buck. But what is that going to do for them in the long run? They're not going to have a 401k being an influencer. Once they're no longer popular, they no longer have a job. So they're going to these unsustainable jobs because companies don't care about them anymore.
Yeah, but you talk about 401k. I'm still hoping we go back to defined benefits to where people work 40 years, get a gold watch and a pension that lasts their lifetime. And again, that's the difference in thinking between someone in Gen X. I'm a early Gen X, and the next generations. They don't even know what a defined benefit pension is. They've been gone for so long because corporate America has so badly screwed the working class of this country over.
Oh, I definitely agree. And if we're going to do anything, I think what we forget as a people is that the big corporations and the elitists are trying to pin us together, and they're doing a very good job because instead of fighting with the people that we should be fighting with, we are fighting amongst ourselves. We are finding everything to be divisive about Republican, Democrat. And I'm like, do you really think either party is really pushing for the people? This is a Democratic and Republican problem because it's a people problem. So why are we not saying, hey, let's all band together and look at them and demand that you start representing us and stop representing the big corporations that are paying for your campaign? And I think if we put some things into place that maybe put some things to where certain people couldn't vote, to me, it's a conflict of interest. If a big corporation gives you millions of dollars to put you in power, who are you working for?
Yeah.
Are you working for me, the people, or are you working for that person that gave you millions of dollars to get in that position?
So you'd have a problem with, say something like Clarence Thomas making a decision on the Supreme Court, when billionaires have paid for his vacations.
Correct. Like that's a conflict of interest. So why are we still allowing to do that in the United States? Term limits. We've wanted term limits since 1995. And 23 states tried to enact term limits. And then a senator from Arkansas says, oh, no, because then that would mean that I'm not getting my kickbacks. He fought it. Then they ended up taking it to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says that only the Constitution can change term limits.
Yeah.
Who has to approve an amendment to the Constitution?
The people.
So why aren't we doing something?
See, but I'm actually not in favor of term limits because I think we have the ultimate term limiter. We as educated, informed, active, engaged voters can go to the polls and throw these bums out anytime we want. The sad reality is, and you hit on it a second ago, we're so well sliced and diced and pitted against each other that we're not even talking about issues anymore. We're stuck in the red hat, blue hat category. Where we've now defined ourselves by who we voted for and which color shirt we're wearing. instead of what policies we need to make our lives and our kids' lives better. And that's how they've gotten us. And they've gotten us good. I mean, to be honest, the massive wealth redistribution that's happened in this country, from the working poor and the working class to our hyper wealthy at the top, is mind-blowingly incredible.
Oh, and it's there. I mean, it's like they're doing it right in front of our face, and we see it, but we're too blind to see it, either because A, we don't want to believe that this is actually happening to the America that we grew up in, or we don't know what to do about it, so we're just going to be blissfully ignorant about what's going on. And I look at some of those things today, and like you said, I made a video the other day that people now are being judged by their political affiliation instead of their character. And I will always judge people by their character, but we can no longer do that. Back in the 80s, nobody talked about who you voted for. You know, there could be people within the same family that were Democrat and Republican, and you judge somebody on their character, how they treated you, how they treated people in their communities. But now it's like, I'm not going to help you if you don't believe exactly everything that I believe in. It's either you're with me or against me, instead of saying we are all in this together. So why aren't we helping each other out? Because we are stronger together.
Let me ask you this, because I made a comment a little bit earlier, and I said, look, the sad reality is we've got people who get into politics because they want attention, not so much they want to help people. I mean,
Right.
I look at the Republican Party right now, and I'm going to be quite open and honest about it. I say they hate working people. Just look at the things that they do. Look at the policies that they've put into place over the last 40 years. Look at the destruction of program after program. And we could debate that forever, but I don't see any policy initiatives coming from that side of the aisle to do what you said, raise the minimum wage, to make sure that people get health care, to address housing concerns, because all of this stuff we can, with smart policy and sound investment, address as our grandparents' generation did.
Oh, most definitely. And I think that that's what we're missing. I mean, right there, when's the last time a common American decided just to go and read a bill? Like, read the 82 pages of a bill. We don't. You know what we read? We read the headline. And they put the headline as what we want to hear. So it'd be like, oh, we're going to get rid of student debt loans, so we're going to put that as a headline. But what you don't realize, in that bill, they've patted each other's backs and said, okay, we're going to put this bill, but we're also going to add this into it. And we don't see it. So we're like, yes, we want you to vote for that bill. We do. And then other things that we didn't read are actually going to affect our future. So how would they have so much power to just add things into a bill that none of us see?
Corporate lobbyists.
Yes.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Jessica McCabe. You can check her out on Twitter. I mean, on TikTok, right? You got like a huge TikTok following.
Yes, it's on TikTok.
Like almost 1 million people, right?
I think it's 780,000.
Good for you. Because look, we need more people who are gonna have the kind of voice that you've got on this. So let me ask you, how do we address this? I mean, you ask questions about housing. You said, why is it that, housing costs $2,000 a month for an apartment? Why do you think that is?
Well, why are we letting foreign governments buy land in America that don't even live here? It's like they're parking their money here in the United States. Why are we letting big corporations buy out a lot of the inventory and then putting it directly for rent? So it's like they're saying, you will never own anything, you will rent, and you will pay our mortgages so that we can sell it later, and you'll be happy about it. So unfortunately, when these big companies come in and buy houses and raise the rent, the regular person that bought an investment property, which there's no wrong way to buy an investment property, they're going, wait, well, if this is going for $2,000, I can also sell it for $2,000 because I need it because this inflation's killing me. So they rise up the rent, meaning the big corporations, and make the other people who are just doing investment properties, blue collar, that just want to make a little extra money, they do the same thing.
See, I got to tell you, I was expecting a different answer. I got to tell you, Jessica, I thought we were going to argue. I thought we were going to disagree on a lot of stuff. But, this is the thing about Gen Xers. We find common ground. So how do we get the rest of Gen X to realize that it was our generation who led the slide downward? We grew up in the era of greed is good, the one with the most toys when he dies wins, when that hooray for me mentality. How do we come back to the idea that smart policy, sound investment is the way forward? We can address all of our problems if we figure out how to come off the sidewalks yelling at each other and come back to the streets.
Like I told my kids, the way I really found out was I lived like my kids, so I actually went out with them, looked at apartments. I actually looked at their budget with them, and they showed me all these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it like really opened up my eyes. And I felt guilty for going on a vacation, because me and my husband could afford it, and here's my daughter working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, 8 months pregnant, just to try to put food on the table. And I'm like, holy, so when you start seeing that, and you have to have empathy, us as Gen Xers are supposed to make, every generation is supposed to make the next generation better than the one we just came from. So when did we lose that lesson?
No, and I'm glad you brought that up because, I say all the time, we grew up believing, and I'm sure you'll agree, that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead. And
Right.
that, this idea that it was our birthright almost, that each generation would do just a little bit better than the previous generation. And that seems to have stalled. And a lot of it comes back to the greed that we see in our corporate boardrooms, the bad policy that's been allowed to be put in place over the last 40 years, and our, I got to be honest, our ability to allow ourselves to be sliced and diced and pitted against each other.
Oh, I agree. And I think that we got used to being kind of spoiled, meaning if out of sight, out of mind. If we didn't see it, if it didn't affect us, if we were still able to go on our vacations, if we still had our 401ks, then we're like, okay, well, I'm fine. Everybody else should be fine. So if you don't see it, you don't realize there's a problem to change it. And I think that if we just have a little bit of empathy and start lifting up the next community, can you imagine how much stronger this world would be if we actually worked together and tried to make it a better place to be?
Oh, heaven forbid. Can't have that because then no Jeff Bezos, no Elon Musk's.
No, you wouldn't.
No.
And it's literally turning into, like I said, the ultra wealthy and then everybody else.
Okay.
Everybody else outnumbers the ultra wealthy. So why aren't we doing something?
Yeah, again, I say this all the time. They've got all the money, but we've outprocreated them. If we would
Right.
just come together on some simple ideas, maybe. But there was a guy back in 2004 ran on this platform of the Two Americas. You may remember him. John Edwards said, eventually we're going to end up in a place where you've got the haves and the have-nots. And sadly, it appears that we have made that reality. But Jessica, last question I've got for you: how do we get people like you to run for something? How do we get people like just average, everyday working people to come out and go, you know what? We're going to go to Washington, or we're going to go to Montgomery, or we're going to go to Harrisburg, or we're going to go wherever, and we're going to make those 82-page laws. And what's going to say inside of them is we're going to help working people. We're going to help mothers so they don't have to work into their 8th month of being pregnant. We're going to help families get by so that they want to bring children to this world. How do we get you to run for something?
Well, I think nobody can do that alone. And I think that's the problem. When you go into government, you go in there with nice ideals, but then the greed monster kind of takes over and you become self-serving. So the only way to not be self-serving is to be with the people before. I mean, you have to be in the trenches with the people while you're making those rules.
Well, good stuff, Jessica. I appreciate you taking time for us. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks so much. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, President of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The old factory towns in America's heartland have been taking a beating. Thing is, though, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. After years of politicians talking about it, they finally passed a big new infrastructure package to rebuild roads and bridges, fix drinking water systems, and make the energy grid more secure. We're finally turning things around after 40 years of screwing over working people. But will we keep moving in the right direction? That's our choice as Americans.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
I gotta tell you, I really liked her. Again, we need more voices like that to step out of the darkness and say, look, life's tough. You know, the kids are struggling. It wasn't like this for us. And as Jessica said, look, I was making $4.35 an hour back then. Able to afford a place to live, a crummy car, was able to get by. And the reality is inflation has gone up, but consolidation has been a huge part of this. You know, I remember my first apartment. I think I paid $135 a month for when I was in college. Granted, minimum wage was $3.35 an hour back then, but that isn't $1,200, $1,500 a month on a $7.25 minimum wage. And there were more diverse, more unionized jobs, more opportunities than there are currently. Everyone now wants gig employment. Everyone now, you're going to be your own boss. And this idea that, again, I think my generation, and I'm going to speak for the whole generation at this point, believed that if you work hard, you play by the rules, you're going to get ahead. That's just the equation. That was what was laid out in front of us. And that the harder you worked, the meritocracy idea, the harder you worked, the better off you were going to be. We believed that. We internalized it. And you talk to people of our generation, and it comes out in all of the rhetoric. That has changed, and has changed in enormous ways. Now, again, I got a couple of emails from folks, and too many to go through at this moment, but some of it going, well, again, the divisive stuff. Well, it was great for white men, but not for women or minorities, or I got all that, and I agree. Question is how do we take all of this stuff that has been dividing us for so long? How do we take all of this stuff, learn from it, and move forward? Because here's the weird thing. This is the spot that I've been in for a while. I don't know how you get past the divisive stuff. I don't know how you get past the hard barriers that people throw up. Well, this is my issue. How do you get past that? I brought up the song about the guy that sang the song last week, that evidently is all over the country music charts. I asked the question of, when you hear that song, where do you put yourself? Because the responses I got from people, well, he's being racist, or he's being this, or he's being that. And I hear a guy who's saying, look, life's tough. Wages are crummy. I'm struggling, working my behind off, not getting ahead. And there's a point at which people go, well, what's the point of working if you're not going to get ahead? What's the point of my struggles and my labor and my, the ache of my back and the sweat of my brow, not being able to keep a roof over my head? It was about, I guess it's been about 15 years now, where we had done a food drive. The idea was we're going to help the food bank and the homeless shelter. So we did a Hungry and Homeless for the Holiday food drive. And I guess it just shows to my privilege that I didn't realize that people who were in the homeless shelters actually held full-time jobs. I mean, it makes sense when you stop and you think about it, that, it's possible that people who work could be homeless, but I was surprised by the number of people in the homeless shelter who worked at all of our establishments that you didn't know that they were homeless. They came, they did their job, and then they went back to nowhere. And in what society is that sane or rational? And then you have people who are going to say, well, we can't possibly raise the minimum wage. What kind of a society do we want? And the reason that I reached out to Jessica is I'm like, look, I think what you said was spot on. Again, I was a little harsh, saying, well, congratulations, when did you figure this out? And I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Career military, as she said, never thought about any of that stuff. Housing, healthcare, retirement. The S word. It's kind of socialistic. But that doesn't trickle down to the workforce. Because we used to have that. You spent 40 years working for an employer that gave you a gold watch and a defined benefit pension. You had that. You had a little bit of your savings. You had Social Security. You got to live your life out with dignity in your home. Now we've destroyed the defined benefit pension. Republicans want to take away Social Security. And, well, your savings, it's been eaten away by corporate profits. What are we going to do? Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads, but I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day and only earning minimum wage. Was real difficult to make a living. And then the Teamsters pushed a lot so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind, the union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
Before we close the program, we want to take a moment to thank our viewers and to share a little bit about why we do what we do. At The Rick Smith Show, we believe that media today is almost entirely controlled by corporate greed. So we have now 24-hour news channels. But instead of 24 hours of news, what we get is 1 hour repeated 24 times, and with tons of commercials creating obscene amounts of profits. Information once presented as a public service has now become a private commodity. So when lies make money, lies are what we get. We get a corporate-controlled rage machine feeding us anger and hate, trying to convince us that our problems are right-left or red-blue, when they are and always have been up-down, the wealthiest 1% versus the rest of us. Our goal is to be an alternative to that machine, not as a news show with a fancy journalist out front, but as a talk show run by a union truck driver and a team of working-class heroes just like you. Everything we do, both what we get right and what we get wrong, is dedicated to advancing the interests of America's working families. No corporate ad buys, no think tanks, no focus groups, no talking points. We are media by working people, for working people. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.